It was a scorching July day in 1908 when archaeologist Luigi Pernier descended into the ruins of Phaistos, a Minoan palace complex sprawled atop a Cretan hillside in Greece. The sun baked the ancient stones beneath his boots, and the sea glittered in the distance. His heart raced not with excitement, but with that deep-seated dread all archaeologists share. The fear that today's dig would yield yet another pile of broken pottery shards, or worse, nothing at all. Pernier had been at this for weeks, sweating through the labyrinthine ruins of a civilization that had once flourished some 3,500 years ago. Most of his days had been spent sifting through rubble and dust, praying for something, anything, that might give him his Eureka moment. The Minoans had been fascinating, yes, but elusive. Their palaces were impressive, their art beautiful, and yet, frustratingly, their script, Linear A, remained undeciphered. But beneath the debris of a storage room, an unimpressive chamber long forgotten by both the Minoans and the modern world, Pernier's shovel hit something hard. At first glance, it seemed like just another slab of ancient clay. Great. More ceramics, he probably thought, rolling his eyes. But then, as the dust cleared, the unmistakable spiral of symbols revealed itself. A strange, intricate pattern carved into the clay, like an ancient Minoan Twitter feed, spiraling inward with cryptic, pictographic messages. The disc was a round, flat piece of clay, just over 6 inches in diameter, inscribed with 241 symbols arranged in a spiraling, hypnotic sequence. No one had seen anything quite like it. The symbols resembled some kind of hieroglyphs, flowers, shields, and even what appeared to be people, some looking rather confident for clay etchings. The symbols were stamped, not engraved, as if mass-produced in some ancient Minoan factory that no one knew existed. Now, today, the replica Phaistos discs seem to be partially handmade and partially mass-produced, like this one here that I picked up while actually going to visit the Phaistos disc in Crete. But at the time, doubts arose. The dig site was too pristine. The disc was found too perfect, nestled beneath layers of debris. Was this really a relic from the Bronze Age, or was it a clever hoax planted by some intrepid archaeologist with an eye for immortality? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time an archaeologist had, shall we say, helped history along. After all, there's nothing like discovering something when you need to boost your career. But Pernier didn't care. He had the disc in his hands, and he was about to set the archaeological world on fire. The early interpretations of the disc were wild, perhaps not unlike a game of charades played with ancients. Some believed the symbols were a prayer, others a form of poetry. Maybe it was a royal decree, a land registry, some poor scribe's grocery list. The scholarly world was in a frenzy, flipping through their dusty books and racking their brains to decipher the message. But here is the kicker. No one could decipher it. Not then, not now. The Phaistos disc was unlike anything ever found. Its symbols didn't match any known language, not Linear A, not Linear B, not even something made up for kicks. It was as though the disc had dropped out of the sky, carrying with it secrets of an ancient world lost to time, or perhaps something more. You see, because the disc was such a mysterious artifact that was stamped with an unknown language, process of how it was made and its origins have been questioned by many. Imagine, if you will, a hidden factory churning away beneath the rolling hills of ancient Crete, long before anyone even conceived of the idea of industrial production. A vast, secretive complex where Minoan workers toiled under the watchful eyes of their overseers, stamping out mysterious symbols onto clay discs with precision and efficiency that would make even a modern-day assembly line blush. A place where the gears of ancient ingenuity ground forward, churning out relics designed to outlast the very civilization that built them. Or perhaps it wasn't that dramatic, but let's have some fun. You see, the theory of the ancient Minoan factory to explain the existence of the Phaistos disc comes from the realization that the symbols were probably stamped, not painstakingly carved by hand. If we entertain this line of thought, suddenly you can almost hear the distant clatter of clay being slapped onto the wooden molds, the rhythmic thunk 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 of artisans stamping identical symbols into discs, one after the other. Workers, probably some poor souls who didn't make it into the upper ranks of Minoan society, hunched over their stations, mass-producing items that no one quite understood. You see, in this kind of world, the Minoans were less of a refined, sophisticated Bronze Age culture and more of the precursors to modern industrialists. But the question is, why would they make this specifically? Why would they make the disc? Well, maybe they wanted to hide something. Something that the Minoans could know about, but didn't want anyone else to know about. Enter one of the more fun hypotheses: the Minotaur. Half man, half bull, and 100% the kind of monster who doesn't play nice with intruders. For centuries, the story of the labyrinth and the Minotaur. For thousands of years, the story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth, a sprawling maze designed by the genius Daedalus to trap the fearsome beast, well, that has captivated the imagination of many. But here's the twist. What if the Phaistos disc wasn't just a relic? What if it was the key to the very labyrinth itself? A coded map leading straight to the lair of the Minotaur? Well, some people have suggested just that. They argue that the disc, with its strange spiral of symbols, isn't just some dusty bureaucratic record or prayer wheel. Oh no, it's a cleverly disguised navigation tool, a kind of ancient map for those brave or foolish enough to enter the labyrinth beneath Knossos. Imagine the scene: a Minoan priest cloaked in ceremonial robes, standing at the entrance of the labyrinth, holding the disc aloft as a sacred guide. The spiral of symbols on the disc representing the maze's twisting corridors, a path only the initiated could follow. Was it a guide to evade the Minotaur? Or, more chillingly, a ritual tool meant to summon the beast itself? Here's where things get a little bit more fun. You see, the labyrinth wasn't just a run-of-the-mill maze. It was a trap, a deadly prison for a monster that devoured human sacrifices. And of course, there's a theory that the Phaistos disc was more than just a map. It was instructions for the ritual sacrifice required to keep the Minotaur satisfied, and well, out of trouble. And well, these same people believe that the Minotaur wasn't just a figure of Greek imagination. They think that the Minotaur was actually real and that the Phaistos disc holds the secret to its location, or even its return. According to these brave souls, the labyrinth still exists, buried somewhere beneath the ruins of Knossos or hidden in the rocky hills of Crete. And the disc is the last remaining clue to its entrance. The Minotaur, they argue, might not be a beast in the traditional sense, but perhaps a symbol of something darker, an ancient power or knowledge long buried by the sands of time. Because, well, every ancient civilization worth its salt seems to have a dark secret. But let's not stop there. The Minotaur is just the beginning. What if the Phaistos disc isn't just connected to a myth, but to a lost civilization? Some have dared to ask the ultimate question: could the Phaistos disc be the last surviving artifact of Atlantis? And that somewhat makes sense. This disc seemed to be thousands of years ahead of its time with how it was stamped, yet the technology at the time didn't match up with how this disc was probably made. So now, Atlantis, the mythical island that sunk beneath the waves, taking with it an advanced civilization and apparently any hope of a peaceful vacation in the Mediterranean. According to those who subscribe to this theory, the symbols on the disc represent the language of Atlantis, and the disc was a relic of the lost world, carried by survivors who fled to Crete before their island nation went under. The spiral pattern on the disc, oh, that's not just decoration, it's a map. They claim showing the layout of Atlantis, or at least its connection to the labyrinth. Because you see, the labyrinth wasn't just a prison, it was a gateway, a secret entrance to the Atlantean knowledge buried somewhere beneath Crete. If you're thinking, wait, how did we go from a maze to Atlantis? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Because some theorists posit that Atlantis and the Minotaur myth are a part of the same story. That the Atlanteans, who apparently had a thing for building impossibly complex structures, constructed the labyrinth to protect their greatest treasure: knowledge. And the Phaistos disc, that's the breadcrumb trail. The Atlanteans left behind clues, hidden in plain sight to guide the worthy back to their forgotten civilization. And the Minoans, bless their artistic souls, just happened to pick up on these clues and ran with it. Was the labyrinth a product of Atlantean engineering? Is the disc an ancient Atlantean Google map? And more importantly, is there some poor Minotaur, or heaven forbid, a descendant of Atlantis, still waiting, buried deep beneath Crete, for someone to stumble upon the disc's real meaning? It's a tantalizing thought. But let's not get too carried away. At the heart of these theories is a simple truth. Nobody really knows what the Phaistos disc was for. And that's exactly why it's so much fun. Whether it's a map to the Minotaur's lair or a relic from the sunken city of Atlantis, the Phaistos disc refuses to give up its secrets that easily. It sits there, mocking us with its spiral pattern of cryptic symbols, daring us to solve the puzzle. But now, what are the more, let's say, scientific theories for what the Phaistos disc really is? Now, I hate to break it to you, but the truth is likely less about ancient monsters and sunken civilizations and more about, well, something that still might be quite important, actually. So, one theory is that the Phaistos disc is not an ancient map to hidden cities or monsters, but it's just a humble religious text. A prayer wheel, perhaps a set of ritual instructions. Boring? Maybe, but think of the drama behind it. Minoan priests in flowing robes gathered in the glow of flickering torches, chanting in unison as they turn their disc in their hands, performing some long-lost ceremony to appease the gods. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a shopping list for the gods. A checklist of sacrifices, each symbol representing something they needed to offer to keep the gods happy. 1 bull, 2 goats, and don't forget, the wine. Sure, it doesn't sound as exciting as a map to the Minotaur's lair, but religious significance was serious business back then. It's not hard to imagine the disc being used in a grand ritualistic setting, kind of like an ancient PowerPoint presentation to the gods. And let's not forget the possibility that the whole disc is just instructions of how to avoid not getting struck by lightning, or having your crops fail. Either way, it's probably not the kind of adventure people were hoping for, but it's still a really interesting insight to the Minoan society. Now, another theory is, well, a thrilling one: bureaucracy. There's a very real possibility that the Phaistos disc was nothing more than an official record or an administrative document. Picture some ancient clerks hunched over some ancient desks, stamping symbols into discs, trying to keep track of Minoan inventories. Ah yes, 42 amphorae of olive oil and 18 sacrificial goats. Better make sure the boss sees this properly written down. In this theory, the disc is essentially an ancient government piece of paperwork. The kind that no one really wants to fill out, but everyone has to. It could have been a record of transactions, a tribute list, or even land registry. Now, of course, this makes the Phaistos disc the Bronze Age equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet. Efficient, practical, but definitely lacking in thrills. Sure, it's important for society to keep running, but it's hardly the stuff of myths and legends. But hey, maybe somewhere out there, there's another disc that contains the Minoan version of a resignation letter. Dear King Minos, I'm quitting the labyrinth maintenance gig. I'm tired of dealing with that gosh darn Minotaur. Now, one last and very possible theory that brings the charm back to the disc is this. Well, what if the Phaistos disc wasn't a ritual tool or a bureaucratic record at all? What if it was an educational device? Think of it as a Rosetta Stone for Minoan kids. A tool that could teach them how to read and write, or at least familiarize themselves with the symbols of their culture. That spiral pattern, maybe it was a game of sorts, guiding young Minoans through their first steps of literacy. You can almost picture the ancient classroom, rows of Minoan children seated on stone benches, squinting at clay tablets as their teacher points at the symbols on the disc, telling them, this symbol means cow, this one means sword, and this one, well, we're not sure, but we think that it means angry god, so let's move on. But at the end of the day, the mystery wins. The real thrill of the Phaistos disc lies in the fact that it remains an enigma. Despite all the theories from religious artifacts to bureaucratic forms to educational tools, nobody can say with certainty what it was meant for. And that's the beauty of it. Every time we think we've cracked the code, the disc slips through our fingers, like a puzzle whose final piece is just out of reach. Maybe the disc is meant to confuse us. Maybe it was designed by some ancient Minoan trickster who got a good laugh thinking about future generations pulling their hair out trying to decipher it. Or maybe just maybe, there is some sort of truth behind the myth of the Minotaur, the Labyrinth, or Atlantis. I mean, deep down, we all want to believe that there's still some bit of magic left in this world. And as long as the Phaistos disc remains undeciphered, that magic, whether tied to labyrinths, lost civilizations, or ancient paperwork, well, that magic lives on. Thanks for watching. And I have 2 other channels that make videos like this, but in different genres, in economics and history, and if you like either of those genres, please click on those channel links down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video and on my other channels in just a few seconds.